critical thinking on current issues. This is Undercurrent. Welcome back. This is going to be the final episode of Season 1. We did a shortened season as we just launched into helping us set the tone and set the stage for what it's going to mean to go undercurrent. But Season 2 is coming very soon. In June, we'll launch Season 2 with many more episodes, and you're going to continue to have a place to think well about these current issues. Well, it's been an exciting week for us. These last few days have been amazing. We've launched our new organizational brand, Think Media, and we have a new platform, thinkmedia.com, where now all of the talks that we've been curating and commissioning over many, many years are now available for free. So we've removed the paywall. There's no more subscription. You literally can come in for free and you can access so many different talks, so many different interviews, so many different topics and subjects that will help you as you create conversations that lead to wisdom. You're going to love this platform at thinkmedia.com. You can go in, set up an account. It's a free account, but once you do, it's going to allow you to start creating conversations. We even have an entire training on how to think well that I've done that takes less than an hour, but helps you walk through how to apply Christian thinking to every current issue that you're going to encounter. In addition, you're going to have a guide to lead conversations. Everything we're doing is meant to put all of this into your hands right where you've been called so that you can steward well your family, your kids, your friends, your community, your church, your school system, your workplace, everywhere that you have influence. You are a thought leader and you have the ability to shape the thinking of everyone around you. And so we want to encourage and inspire you to do that and make thinkmedia.com the place, your source, a place you can trust for good information, for great conversation starters, and a place that allows us to have conversations about topics and subjects that in some areas of our culture have become off limits. So I hope you'll take us up on that at thinkmedia.com. Get engaged, get involved, and join with us. Now, as we move into today's episode 5, Understanding the Technocracy, you're going to hear a lot of different perspectives around what does it mean to think about technology and the way it starts to implant itself into our lives. I'm going to be describing some of the ways technology has created some of the controls that we've all gotten very comfortable with. I'm going to describe ways in which it's making us less human by trying to help us become superhumans. You're going to hear from many different sources, some different voices that I'm bringing in to just help you acquaint yourself with the new reality of technocracy. Now, this is a word that we don't talk about a lot, but I do believe you're going to hear this word a lot more as we move into the season ahead. And so today's episode's designed to help us just understand it, understand what it means, understand the places in which it will be employed, and to help us continue to be curious, to think well, and advance good right where we've been called. Let's listen in now. We're all inundated with headlines, with news, with new information, with ways in which we're trying to discern and figure out, well, does this matter? Does this mean anything to me? And through Undercurrent, that's our goal, is to just help you have a place to come back to where you can consistently try to think deeply about this. Now, my 20-year career in leading our organization has really been built around helping leaders stay curious, having humility, thinking well, processing through the complexities of a lot of opinions, a lot of information, seeking to kind of distill that to what is knowledge and then ultimately what is wisdom, and then ultimately advancing good. What do we do with this? How do we actually live in a better way? In this episode today, we're going to talk about technocracy. Technocracy is probably not a term that's that common. It's not that familiar. It's not something we talk about a lot in our conversations. But I would submit to you it's a huge idea. It's a big idea, and it's an important idea for us to start to get our head around what is taking place. Let me just give you the Encyclopedia Britannica's definition of technocracy. It's this: government by technicians who are guided solely by the imperatives of their technology. Government by technicians who are guided solely by their technology. Now, the word technocracy is starting to be used quite a bit. It's being used by those who are looking into the future, and they're predicting, where is all of this technology going? We talk about AI, we talk about all these advances in biosecurity and discussions around global passports and social credit systems and how our phones start to use QR codes to give us access to this or that. It all starts to paint a picture of a world that starts to have a lot more controls built in. A world where there's less freedom, less ability to move freely, and much more control being exerted. Control that is designed to be more convenient for you, is designed to make you feel safe, but nevertheless is starting to put more technology into your life. And so we're all experiencing that. It's part of just our everyday. It's part of us using GPS, right, to track where we're driving. Well, it's very convenient. It helps us. But it also means there's data that's tracking where you're driving, that's being captured by companies and corporations and governments. Your sense of privacy that you might would have had 20 years ago is no longer, because we're now carrying around these digital devices that track our every move, our every touch. There's even parts of apps now that can track the way your fingers move on a keyboard and can predict even what your communication is going to be. And so we're now in a new world where technology, where artificial intelligence is being used in such a way to both help us and help our lives be maybe easier or more convenient, but in a lot of ways has a dark side to it, has a shadow side, and that is what technocracy is. Now, recently I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Paul Kingsnorth, and he's someone that thinks a lot about this future. He writes about it. He thinks about probably some of the worst case scenarios of where this future could go. And I would say not everybody believes this is going to go to a worst case scenario, but there are those that do, that I think it's important for us to pay attention to. And so I'd like you to just hear how he would talk about technocracy.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I suppose it's a word that's been around for a long time, but really what we're talking about is what you summarized there, which is a society which is more and more controlled by the technology that supposedly liberates it. So really, I would suggest that we're pretty much there already, or we're certainly on the brink of it. I mean, if you look at who holds much of the financial power, much of the economic, and increasingly the political power in a place like America today, it's a lot of the social media owners. Technocracy is really a system in which we are so interconnected by digital technologies. We are so monitored by them, and the freedoms that they give us come with a price. And the price, as you just suggested, is a degree of monitoring and potential control that has never been possible before in history.
It's never been possible before in history. So you and I are living in a time where something that was never possible before is now possible, where surveillance, where transaction history, think about Venmo, think about Cash App, think about the way in which you spend money and transact. Did you know that in July in the US, and there are many other countries around the world that are launching new digital currencies? The one in the US is called FedNow. It's a new transaction system that's going to allow digital technology to now start to inform our transactions. Well, that sounds very convenient, but from a technocracy perspective, what it means is the technology starts to let you know what you can buy and what you can sell. And if you fast forward that and you look at how places like China, for example, have used systems like this, once the population starts to use digital transaction only, and they implement something called the social credit system, you start to move into a place where social credit, which is basically, is your social behavior aligning with the government? Do you believe the same ideologies that the government's purporting? Well, if you do, you're going to have a great score and you're going to get to have lots of freedoms. But if you don't, you won't. Let's listen to how Dr. Min-Shin Pei describes a social credit system.
China is developing it. It's not perfected, but the concept is quite clear. That is, anything you do will earn you a score. Right now, I think Americans know what our credit score is. Just think the expansion of your credit score to include your social activities. If you, say, run a traffic light, that would be considered a minus point. So right now, our credit score is not connected with our social conduct, our political conduct. And in China, it can be connected with your political conduct. For example, if you visit a website that the Chinese government doesn't like, for example, if they visit Gabe's website, and that will be recorded because the Chinese government has the capacity to track your online activities. So in other words, a social credit score, a social credit system tracks all and every of your activities. Yes. And that is a very frightening prospect if it actually works. Because right now the technological challenges are enormous, but the Chinese government is not giving up.
So you can hear there that some of these things should be quite scary to hear about, right? It's dystopian. This isn't an episode of Black Mirror. This is actually happening in the real world. And in China, what that means now is that people who don't align with the policy of the government they're restricted. They can't buy train tickets. They can't buy plane tickets. They're limited to a 5-mile radius in some cases around their town, and they're not allowed to leave. They don't have access to freedom. They don't have free will movement. Now, I realize for some that can be, well, that's happening in China. There's no way that could happen here. But the vision of technocracy is that technology starts to become more and more in charge, and those who want to use technology to build governments, to build controls, to start to remove your individualism and start to associate you with a certain pattern, with a certain prototype, with a certain way in which they've deemed that you're living. And then all of a sudden, you're stuck in a control grid. Now, the crazy part about this is you and I are helping build this right now, right? With our own phones, with the way we're transacting, with the way we use these technologies, because they're convenient. We start to build the data. We start to build the surveillance. We start to build the actual system that one day could enslave us because we've given up so much of our freedom and liberty and decided that we want to be a part of the convenience. Well, the convenience structure will come with a cost, and some, like Dr. Paul Kingsnorth, have helped paint that picture and look to the future. But he's not the only one. There's many other leaders, people who aren't concerned about this future, but actually see this future as the best future, who are seeing a merging of biotechnology into humanity as a future that gives us so much more opportunity as human beings. Let's listen to Yuval Noah Harari, the author of Sapiens, describe for other leaders how he sees this future.
This danger can be stated in the form of a simple equation, which I think might be the defining equation of life in the 21st century. B times C times D equals R, which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans, R. If you know enough biology and you have enough computing power and data, you can hack my body and my brain and my life, and you can understand me better than I understand myself. You can know my personality type, my political views, my sexual preferences, my mental weaknesses, my deepest fears and hopes. You know more about me than I know about myself. And you can do that not just to me, but to everyone. A system that understands us better than we understand ourselves can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. Now, in the past, many tyrants and governments wanted to do it, but nobody understood biology well enough, and nobody had enough computing power and data to hack millions of people. Neither the Gestapo nor the KGB could do it. But soon, at least some corporations and governments will be able to systematically hack all the people. We humans should get used to the idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We are now hackable animals.
I mean, how does that strike you? We are no longer free will human beings. We're hackable animals. That's the vision being put forth. That was 2020. That was a presentation to the World Economic Forum. This is an author of a book called Sapiens that's recommended by leaders in our current culture, people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Barack Obama, celebrating this vision of a future and the belief that all of the merging of this technology is a good thing for humanity. Well, it's not. This vision of a future that man is a machine that's to be manipulated, that's to be tinkered with, that technology can influence and shape and can know you better than you know yourself. This is not a future that has God in it. This is a future that's driven by people, by human beings who want more power, who want more control. And they're going to be reliant on you and I to give that to them. And so we need to be aware of this. We need to think about technocracy at a higher level. We need to think about how much convenience we need in our life, and how much we want to give up some of these freedoms, some of these abilities to interact and transact in a world that's going to require so much more of us. I mean, think about our daily habits. Think about how many times do you order Amazon packages? How many times are you using technology to order your groceries so that every single thing you do is tracked, is known about you, is actually put down to a very personal, individualized stamp of who you are, of what your preferences are, of what you like to read, of what you like to watch, of the ways in which you like to shop and buy, all being used by corporations to continue to manipulate you further down a path that leads to their vision for your life, not necessarily God's vision for your life, not necessarily a vision that's actually going to help you flourish, but that leads you down these paths. Well, a year ago, an executive order was created in the U.S., and this kind of went unnoticed. Few people were paying attention to this discussion around biotechnology and the way in which biology should start to interact with technology. But I want to put it here because I want you to see it. I want you to read it. I want you to see the words yourself. This executive order on advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing, innovation for sustainable, safe, and secure American bioeconomy says this: for biotechnology and biomanufacturing to help us achieve our societal goals, the United States needs to invest in foundational scientific capabilities. We need to develop genetic engineering technologies and techniques to be able to write circuitry for cells and predictably program biology in the same way in which we write software and program computers. Unlock the power of biological data, including through computing tools and artificial intelligence, and advance the science of scale-up production while reducing the obstacles for commercialization so that innovative technologies and products can reach markets faster. You see, when you read it in these words, this is a future being built. Like it or not, agree with it or not, this is a future that's moving forward, that's going to require us to draw ethical lines, to decide how much am I going to allow technology to infuse itself into my life. It's always going to come in the form of convenience, whether it's putting on your Apple Watch and enjoying the benefits of tracking your heartbeat, your pace, your steps for the day, the ways in which you're sleeping and your sleep patterns at night. Every piece of that data is going somewhere. It's for your good in this moment, but it's being tracked to you. And I'm not trying to create fear. I'm just wanting you to think well about this. How are you adopting technologies into your life, and where will you draw those lines? I think of the one that many of us have heard about, Neuralink by Elon Musk. Certainly a tool that's being premiered as a way in which those who potentially cannot walk or are paralyzed would have the ability to put a Neuralink, a chip, into their head, placed into their skull. If you've not watched the video, it's linked in our show notes where you can actually watch how that process would take place. But a Neuralink that's designed to bypass your nervous system and allow someone to operate their body in a new way. Well, that sounds amazing, especially if you're somebody who's dealing with that disability. But many times what happens is this technology starts as a help for us. It starts as something related to health or a way in which to improve something that's disabled. And yet the fruit of it, the way in which that tool ends up being put into operation, is that we're then told later that it's going to allow us to operate our cell phones. It's going to be able to allow us to function in a way that we use our brains to manipulate things around us, and starts to, again, perfect biology in man's view of how our biology ought to operate. Well, these are the kind of questions that I think Christians have to be asking bigger questions about. In our churches, in our discussions with our friends, how far are we going to go? How much are we going to integrate and implement these types of systems, and where is the line? These aren't easy answers. I don't have a list of easy answers for you. What I beg of you is to pay attention, to be aware of technocracy, to be aware of the system that's being built. There are some that predict this type of a system will lead to enslavement. It will lead to those who are elites, who have wealth, who have power, who control corporations, really creating two classes of people in our society. The middle class goes away and the elites start to control the peasants. We move back into a system we've seen throughout history where those who have little power and little control and little free will are actually forced to play into a bigger system being built for them. Now, I don't know that that's the future. We can't predict the future, but we can look at the patterns. We can look at the intent. We can look at the vision that people have. Again, possibly motivated really well. They think this is a better vision for humanity, but we as Christians, we have to think through, what is the vision for humanity? What does it mean to value life? What does it mean to value liberty? What does it mean to value free expression? What does it mean to value every human being being made in the image of God, not being conformed or shaped in the image of a corporation or a way in which we're being manipulated to vote certain ways, think certain ways, buy certain things? You could go to Yuval Noah Harari's website and you can see in their own words the way they think about this future. Here's what he says: history began when humans invented gods and will end when humans become gods. I can't disagree with the fact that it will end when humans become gods, and yet that's the very systems, that's the very structures that are being put into place to make humans more godlike. And so what do we do about this? Well, first, we recognize that Our battle is not against flesh and blood. We look at Ephesians and we recognize the battle that we're in is a spiritual battle. There is a spiritual battle that's in direct conflict, and it's fighting for the soul of humanity. It's fighting for the flesh. It's fighting for this idea that human beings want to live eternally. They want to be like gods. And yet we stand as Christians in humility going, no, the Lord actually calls us to a different way of seeing our role in the world. That we're actually sacrificially committed to pursuing the thing God has for us, that His understanding of the future is more reliable than my understanding of the future, and that I don't get to actually control these things. I don't get to dictate the future, that He wants me to live a life that actually honors Him and glorifies Him, and in the process brings other people along to experience that kind of freedom. You see, the enemy doesn't really have new tricks. We can look back throughout the ages and understand that systems like this have always been employed. We can go all the way back to Egypt. We can go back to slavery systems that over time have always been created. And you know why? Because slavery has actually always been the one economy that's created the most wealth for those in power. And so, of course, free societies don't do that for those in power. Free societies come against that type of control. And so we find ourselves in a moment to ask ourselves, how will we remain free-willed human beings, people who can make their own choices, their own decisions? How do we create communities around our churches, around our local areas where we're actually in community with people, and we're going to continue to operate in freedom? We're going to operate in a way that allows this technology not to control our lives. We're going to find creative ways to work together, to transact, to gather, to be a part of one another's lives in building these parallel structures that actually help us stay outside of that control system that's being built. Now, that's going to take amazing ingenuity. That's going to take imagination. That's going to take creativity from you and from me. But together, I believe more and more of us want that kind of creativity. We love that challenge. We'll rise to that challenge. And we'll be the kind of people that continue to live in a way that promotes freedom, that promotes individual free will, and promotes these ideologies that promote a truthful way of seeing the role of being a human being in the world. Thank you for joining us for this episode, and let's continue to tune in and continue to invite other people to be a part of these conversations with you. You can't do this alone. It takes a community, it takes friends, it takes relationship to help us define, discern, and know how to lead forward. And so I encourage you to continue to do that right where you've been called. Well, I know you learned some new things through this episode, and we're able to see some of the perspectives, the way in which the world and leaders in the world are thinking about technocracy, the ways in which maybe it's already integrated into your life, and you're maybe questioning, what are some of the ways in which I can extricate myself a bit from the ways I'm very wrapped up in this new technocracy? Well, it begins with thinking well. It begins foundationally with understanding these ideas, and then it begins with conversations. And so I want to encourage you, don't let this just be something you listen to and consume. Let's let this be a catalyst for conversations, to create conversations that lead to wisdom. You can go to thinkmedia.com now and you can actually watch this video episode. You can also share it with friends. You can create conversations through our platform that allow you to share it, set up a Zoom link, and create a virtual conversation with other friends. In our world today, we're going to need more and more spaces that allow us to talk, that allow us to discuss, that allow us to learn together, to sharpen one another, to even push back on areas, even that you heard me describe that you think, well, that's a little over the top, that's a little alarmist. Well, if that's what you think, great. Have a conversation with others about it and see how you're orienting to the new world that we're living in. Well, I've enjoyed starting this conversation with Undercurrent and Season 1. I hope you'll share this entire season with friends, with neighbors, with coworkers, with colleagues, with people that you serve at your church with those in which you're doing life with. It'll start a conversation that many people are having in private, but haven't had a place to have it in public. And let's start to make that normal. Let's start to make real conversations about the current issues and the way they're affecting our lives, the way they're making us question what it really means to be human. Let's lead those conversations. And as we move into Season 2, we'll go even deeper into what does it mean for us to be the kind of human beings that are not only flourishing ourselves, but are bringing that type of life and flourishing to everyone around us. And I look forward to helping us continue to get underneath current culture.